أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So last time then we started this section, line number 20. وبعد 35 حضر بنيان بيت الله لما اندثر. That when the Prophet ﷺ was 35 years old, they rebuilt the Kaaba when it had become ruined somewhat. They rebuilt the Kaaba, and that was when the Prophet ﷺ was 35 years old. And last time we started by talking about the full story of how the Kaaba was first built by Ibrahim alayhi salam and his son Ismail alayhi salam. That we mentioned last time. So continuing with that section, just to finish it off, we understand therefore that the Quraysh, they all decided to rebuild and renew the Kaaba after it had become somewhat ruined over time. And some of the walls had started to crumble, especially because that area is in a valley, and so when it used to rain and the flood waters used to come around the Kaaba, on the walls of the Kaaba, then the building of the Kaaba and the walls, they began to deteriorate as a consequence of that. So it needed to be rebuilt, it needed to be redone. And so they did that when the Prophet ﷺ was 35 years old, meaning it was 5 years before he became a prophet. It is mentioned in Al-Bukhari and Muslim from Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhuma قال لما بنيت الكعبة, when the Kaaba was rebuilt, ذهب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعباس ينقلان الحجارة. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abbas were transporting the stones and the rocks. They were picking up the big stones that would be like the brickwork for the Kaaba, and they were bringing them. فقال عباس للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it mentions in this narration how Abbas said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, اجعل إزارك على رقبتك يقيك من الحجارة. فخر إلى الأرض وطمحت عيناه إلى السماء ثم أفاق فقال إزاري إزاري فشد عليه إزاره صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. In the narration, Abbas and the Prophet, they were bringing those stones for the Kaaba to be built. And Abbas said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, put your garment, your clothes that you're wearing, the lower garment, put it over your knee so that these rocks that they were carrying, these stones, they wouldn't scrape your skin. Abbas said to the messenger, put your izar, your lower garment, over your knees to protect the skin from the stones. Otherwise, if the stone goes on to the legs as they were carrying them, it would scrape the skin. So this highlights how the Prophet himself and Abbas, they were carrying those stones to the Kaaba and the building of the Kaaba. Then there is a famous story that is mentioned. وحكموه ورضوا بما حكم في وضع ذاك الحجر الأسود ثم. that when they were building the Kaaba and they were going around putting the bricks on, and one layer at a time it was getting higher and higher, then eventually they got to the level where the black stone needed to be put into its place. So when they got to that level, when the black stone needed to be put into its place, they all began to differ. Because these were all of the tribes, all of the different tribes of the individuals at that time, they were all together building this Kaaba. And so when it got to putting the black stone in its place, all of the different tribes began arguing over who should have the right, which tribe should have the right to pick up the stone and put it in its place. They began to dispute. They all knew that this stone, the sanctity and the sacredness of this stone and the value, and so they all wanted to have that right, that their tribe are the ones who put the black stone back into its place. Every tribe wanted that honor. And so they began disputing, and it was a severe dispute that occurred between them, to the extent it mentions in some narrations they were about to go out into battle against each other over it. They were about to start fighting each other over it, over who gets to put the black stone back into its place. It's mentioned by Ibn Ishaq. You'll hear this name a lot, Ibn Ishaq, one of the famous ones who wrote about Seerah. He says, ثم إن القبائل من قريش جمعت الحجار لبنائها كل قبيلة تجمع على حدة ثم بنوها. That all of the tribes, they were going and collecting the stones and collecting those stones and building the Kaaba. Every tribe was going out there picking up the stones and bringing them to build the Kaaba. Every tribe doing that individually. This tribe going out and getting stones, that tribe going out and getting stones. Every tribe was doing it individually themselves, bringing the stones. And they were building the Kaaba, a row at a time, a level at a time, getting higher and higher. حتى بلغ البنيان موضع الركن. Until those levels, they got high enough that they got to the level where the black stone goes in. فاختصموا فيه. So they began disputing over that, arguing. كل قبيلة تريد أن ترفعه إلى موضعه دون الأخرى. Every tribe wanted to have the honor of picking up the stone and putting it into its place. حتى تحاوروا. Until تحاوروا, meaning all the tribes, they like went into a corner. Every tribe moved off and they got into their groups. One tribe with their group standing here, another tribe in their group standing there, another tribe in their group standing there. All of them split off into their own groups, looking at each other in this dispute. They were no longer all mixed in before. Everybody was bringing the stones and everybody putting the stones on. But now when the dispute happened, everybody moved aside into their groups. So when they did that, تحالفوا وأعدوا للقتال. It got to the level they were getting ready to fight each other. They were getting ready to fight each other. فقربت بنو عبد الدار جفنة مملوءة دما ثم تعاقدوا هم وبنو عدي بن كعب بن لؤي على الموت وأدخلوا أيديهم في ذلك الدم في تلك الجفنة فسموا لعقة الدم فمكثت قريش على ذلك 4 ليال أو 5 ثم إنهم اجتمعوا في المسجد وتشاوروا وتناصفوا. It's mentioned how they brought out a plate of blood, like a blood pact. They made a blood pact over this affair, that this dispute would be resolved by this battle, etc. it was getting to this level of seriousness, and it remained festering like that for 4 or 5 days. Until then, they looked into the affair and they began discussing as to how they could resolve this and get over this impasse. Some of the narrators, they mention some points. Some of them say, Inna Aba Umayyah ibn al-Mughira ibn Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Makhzum كان عامئذ أسن قريش كلها. That Abu Umayyah ibn al-Mughira, he was the eldest of the Quraysh at the time. And he suggested to them, قال يا معشر قريش اجعلوا بينكم فيما تختلفون فيه أول من يدخل من باب هذا المسجد يقضي بينكم فيه. He said to them, look, let us do it this way. The first person to walk into the mosque, to the Al-Masjid Al-Haram area, the first person to walk in, he'll be the judge. We'll make him the judge, whoever it is. Whoever the first person to walk in is, we'll make him the judge in this affair. فَفَعَلُوا. So they agreed on that. They agreed, okay, let's wait. Whoever the first person now walks in, he's going to be the judge. He's going to rule and tell us how to fix this. فَكَانَ أَوَّلَ دَاخِلٍ عَلَيْهِمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. So it mentions in some of these narrations that the first person to walk in happened to be the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهُ قَالُوا. So when they saw him walking in, they said to him, or they began saying to each other rather, هَذَا الْأَمِينَ. This is the trustworthy one. Because that's what they used to call him even before he became a prophet. They used to say that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, the truthful one, the honest one with integrity. That's how they used to view him even before he became a prophet. So when he was the first one to walk in, they began saying, the trustworthy one, the one with integrity and honesty, Al-Amin. Radina. They said, excellent, we're happy with him. Excellent. He can be the one to judge in the affair. We are more than happy to have him as the judge. هذا Muhammad. This is Muhammad. فَلَمَّا انْتَهَى إِلَيْهِمْ وَأَخْبَرُوهُ الْخَبَرِ. So when the Prophet came and arrived at where they were all sitting, they told him what's going on and they told him the situation. And they told him that we agreed the first person to come in, etc., would judge, and that's you. So the messenger took that responsibility and he gave them an idea how to resolve, how to fix this problem of who gets to put the black stone back. He said, هَلُمَّ إِلَيَّ ثَوْبًا. He said to them, bring me a cloth. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to them, bring me a cloth. فَأُتِيَ بِهِ. So a cloth, a big cloth was brought to him. فَأَخَذَ الرُّكْنَ فَوَضَعَهُ فِيهِ بِيَدِهِ. So this big piece of cloth, the Prophet took one corner of it, got a hold of one corner of it, and put it in his hand. ثُمَّ قَالَ لِتَأْخُذْ كُلُّ قَبِيلَةٍ بِنَاحِيَةٍ مِّنَ الثَّوْبِ. He said to all of the tribes, all of you get a hold of one side of the cloth. So all of these tribes now, their representative came and took hold of the cloth, and that tribe from there, that tribe from there. Around this cloth now, all of the tribes had their hands on the cloth. ثُمَّ ارْفَعُوهُ جَمِيعًا. Then he said to them, all of you then lift this cloth up with the, what in the middle of it? The black stone in the middle of the cloth. All of you raise it up. So that means all of the tribes are now picking up the black stone. So then they all did that. حتى إذا بلغوا به جميعا موضعا. They all lifted the cloth all the tribes, and they went up to the corner where it goes. And when they got there, the Prophet then picked it up and put it into its actual place. وَضَعَهُ هُوَ بِيَدِهِ ثُمَّ بُنِيَ عَلَيْهِ. And then they carried on building the stones after that. So this is what is mentioned in some of the narrations. There is some dispute over these kinds of narrations, but some of them, they mention this story that it happened in this way, so that the tribes, all of them lifted the stone in the cloth and they took it to the place, and then the messenger just put it into the actual location. هذا الذي ذكره ابن إسحاق يشهد له ما رواه الإمام أحمد عن مجاهد عن مولاه أنه كان في من يبني الكعبة في الجاهلية. This is what is mentioned by Ibn Ishaq in his Seerah, and there is also a narration in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad that seems to indicate and reflect that same story. We also know then that they continue to build the Kaaba, they continue to go up with the stones of the Kaaba, but then they ran out of pure wealth, because the Quraysh wanted to rebuild the Kaaba with pure wealth, not with haram wealth. So when they ran out of that wealth, they were no longer able to complete the Kaaba on its foundations. The foundations, as you know, you have that semicircle you see in the pictures. The foundations go up to there, like a rectangular shape. So they didn't have enough money, enough wealth left over to be able to finish the Kaaba in that manner upon those foundations. And so instead they built it in the square shape that we see now, and the door was placed up higher than the ground level. As you see now in the pictures, the door is above ground level, it's not at ground level, and that was in those days done in this way to prevent the people from freely accessing and getting in. They placed the door slightly higher. So that's how it was built. It's mentioned in Al-Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Aisha radiyallahu anha, أَلَمْ تَرَيْ أَنَّ قَوْمَكِ قَصُرَتْ بِهِمُ النَّفَقَةِ. Do you not see, meaning, O Aisha, that your people, their wealth ran out, meaning the Quraysh, their wealth ran out in building the Kaaba. And so the messenger said that if it was up to him now, that he would rebuild that Kaaba and place a door to the eastern side and to the western side, and the rock would be inserted, the black stone would be inserted within it. And there are other narrations where the messenger mentioned to Aisha radiyallahu anha, was it not for the fact of the fitna that would occur, then I would knock down the Kaaba and build it again on the original foundations of Ibrahim. Was it not for the fitna? Fitna meaning that if the messenger knocked down the Kaaba, the people would be put to trial with that. What is going on? He's been calling us to this religion all this time, and now he's knocking down the house of Allah. It would be a fitna for the people. And so the messenger didn't do it, because of the principle we now understand, that dar'ul mafasid muqaddamun ala jalb al-masalih. Preventing harm is given priority over bringing benefit. In that case, to prevent the harm that would have occurred from the fitna of the people not knowing what's going on, why is the messenger knocking down the Kaaba? To prevent that situation, the messenger did not bring about the benefit of rebuilding it on its foundations. So it remained upon that way. But later on, after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibn Zubayr, he was able to build the Kaaba on the original foundations. And so he did. It's mentioned in history, Ibn Zubayr built the Kaaba upon the original foundations, upon the foundations of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And it had two doors, on the east and on the west, just as the messenger mentioned he would have done. And they were at ground level. People could come in from one door, walk through the Kaaba, and come out from the other door. He had done that. But then it mentions in history, Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the tyrant, when he killed Ibn Zubayr. After that, he wrote, Al-Hajjaj wrote to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was then the leader of Medina at the time now, the Khalifa of that time then. He wrote to him about what Ibn Zubayr had done, because during the life of the messenger and after that the Khulafa, the Kaaba was upon the square shape, not upon those foundations of Ibrahim. Then Ibn Zubayr had come along and built it upon those original foundations. So when Al-Hajjaj killed Ibn Zubayr, he wrote to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan and said to him, mentioned to him about the Kaaba and what Ibn Zubayr had done. And so they thought, or he thought, or they thought, that Ibn Zubayr had just done that from himself. It was just his own ijtihad, that he had built it like that on those foundations in that rectangular way. And so he commanded him to rebuild it back on the square shape. And so it was rebuilt back onto the square shape. And that's how it has remained ever since. But the original foundations of Ibrahim, they go up to the semicircle that you see. So that was the rebuilding of the Kaaba that occurred 5 years before the Prophet became a prophet. After that then, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was... No sound on Mixelor? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was 40 years old, that's when the prophethood then began. That's when the prophethood then began. So it mentions in the line of poetry here, وَبَعْدَ عَامِ أَرْبَعِينَ أُرْسِلًا فِي يَوْمِ الْإِثْنَيْنِ يَقِينًا فَانْقُلًا. That after the age of 40 years old, when he was 40, he became a prophet. He was made a prophet, a messenger. And that was on a Monday with certainty. So narrate that. After 40 years, when the messenger was 40 years old, that's when he was made a prophet. Al-Imam Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned that this indicates, or within this is an indication, that the maturity of the mind of a person fulfills its peak at the age of 40. Prior to the age of 40, you are still learning, you are still maturing, but at the age of 40, that's when a person matures. That's when a person reaches that level of maturity and fulfills his potential and mind. And Imam Al-Qurtubi said that's why Allah made the Prophet a prophet after the age of 40. After the messenger had now completed his maturity and his mind and reaching the pinnacle and peak of that, that's when Allah بعث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ل40 سنة فمكث بمكة 13 سنة يوحى إليه ثم أمر بالهجرة فهاجر 10 سنين ومات وهو ابن 63. Ibn Abbas, he mentioned رضي الله عنهما, that the messenger was made a prophet at the age of 40. Clear hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Ibn Abbas saying the Prophet was made a prophet at the age of 40. And then he stayed in Mecca for 13 years, revelation coming to him. And then he was commanded to make hijrah for another 10 years in Medina. He stayed, and then he died after that at the age of 63. All of that clear in Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And he was made a prophet on a Monday. في يوم الاثنين. It was a Monday. يقينا فانقلا. He says in the poem, that is with certainty, so you can narrate that. أي متحققا متيقنا لا خلاف فيه. That is something established, there is no difference about it, because there is a hadith in Sahih Muslim where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that hadith of Abu Qatada al-Ansari أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم سئل عن صوم الاثنين, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked about fasting on Mondays. He said, ذاك يوم ولدت فيه ويوم بعثت أو أنزل علي فيه. He said, that is the day that I was born on a Monday, and that is the day that I was sent as a prophet, or the day that the revelation came to me. So that is established that it was on a Monday when the Prophet was 40 years old. Further details in the next line. في رمضان أو ربيع الأول وسورة اقرأ أول المنزل. That it was on a Monday when the messenger was 40 years old, and it was in the month of Ramadan or Rabi'un al-Awwal. That's what he says. It was either in the month of Ramadan or Rabi'un al-Awwal. يشير إلى الخلاف الواقع في الشهر الذي بعث فيه النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. So this highlights that there is a difference of opinion as to what month it was when the revelation began. Some say it was in Ramadan, some say it was Rabi'un al-Awwal. But they all agree it was on a Monday. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned in Zad al-Ma'ad, ولا خلاف أن مبعثه صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يوم الاثنين. There is no difference that the prophethood occurred on a Monday. واختلف في شهر المبعث. But the difference is only about what month that was in. فقيل, so it has been said, لثمان مضين من ربيع الأول. That it was after 8 days into the month of Rabi'un al-Awwal. 8 days into the month of Rabi'un al-Awwal. سنة 41 من عام الفيل. Year 41 from the year of the elephant. Year 41 from the year of the elephant makes the messenger 40 years old. هذا قول الأكثرين. This is what the majority of them say, that it was Rabi'un al-Awwal, 8 days into Rabi'un al-Awwal. But some of them say that it was in Ramadan. وقيل بل كان في رمضان. واحتج هؤلاء بقول الله تعالى. And the evidence that they use, the ones who say that the revelation began in Ramadan, the Prophet became a prophet, it was the month of Ramadan. The evidence they use is in Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah said, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. The month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. قالوا أول ما أكرمه الله أن أنزل عليه القرآن وإلى هذا ذهب جماعة. So they said this is the first thing that Allah honored him with by sending down the Quran, which this ayah says was in Ramadan. So there's a group of scholars who take that opinion that it was in Ramadan when it occurred. So how do the first group of scholars who say it's Rabi'un al-Awwal respond to this explanation and this ayah being used as an evidence? They say إنما كان إنزال القرآن في رمضان جملة واحدة في ليلة القدر إلى بيت العزة ثم أنزل منجما بحسب الوقائع في 23 سنة. They say this ayah is talking about when the Quran was revealed, all of it in one go to Baytul Izzah in the heavens on the night of Al-Qadr, Laylatul Qadr. On Laylatul Qadr, the whole of the Quran was revealed to Baytul Izzah in the heavens. The whole Quran in one go. They say the ayah is talking about that event. As for it coming to the messenger, then the Quran did not come all in one go to the messenger. It came munajjaman, in sections, bit by bit over 23 years. So they say the ayah is not a proof that the first part of the Quran, Iqra, came to the messenger in Ramadan. This ayah is talking about when the Quran as a whole was revealed up to Bayt al-Izzah in the heavens. After that, it was revealed to the messenger in sections. And the first part that was revealed was Iqra. Iqra was the first part of the Quran. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. That was the first part that was revealed, and that is in Al-Bukhari and Muslim from the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu anha, which we'll read right now. The full hadith in Sahih Al-Bukhari and Muslim regarding how the revelation began. And this is right at the beginning of Sahih Al-Bukhari. Sahih Al-Bukhari, right at the start, in the book of Revelation, the third hadith gives you the full story. The third hadith at the beginning of Al-Bukhari. First hadith, of course, is إِنَّمَا الْعَمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ that we did in the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. So the third hadith is the full hadith with the full story. In this narration then, Al-Imam al-Bukhari says, حدثنا يحيى ابن بكير قال حدثنا الليث عن عقيل عن ابن شهاب عن عروة ابن الزبير عن عائشة أم المؤمنين أنها قالت, that Aisha radiyallahu anha, she said, أول ما بدأ به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من الوحي الرؤيا الصالحة في النوم. That the beginning of the revelation to the messenger was, before Iqra, that the messenger used to have dreams that would come true before the actual revelation began. The precursors, what happened before the revelation began. The messenger used to have like revelation coming to him in the form of dreams, true righteous dreams that would come true like the daylight. فكان لا يرى رؤيا إلا جاءت مثل فلق الصبح. So he never used to see a dream except that it would come true like the bright daylight. ثم حبب إليه الخلاء وكان يخلو بغار حراء فيتحنث فيه وهو التعبد الليالي ذوات العدد. And the messenger, he used to love to be by himself. He used to love seclusion. In the cave of Hira he used to go. He used to go to the cave of Hira by himself, to be there alone and to worship Allah alone continuously for many nights. He would stay there for many nights at a time, worshipping Allah. قبل أن ينزع إلى أهله ويتزود لذلك. So he used to take some food for the journey with him and stay, and then he would come back to his wife Khadija to take some more food when it ran out. Because Hira, how far is it from that central Mecca area? The cave of Hira. Mileage, how much mileage do you think? It's not far, it's a mile or two. It's just there, it's not really far. You can see it from the Haram area, you see the picture sometimes, it's there, it's in view. It's not that far. Half an hour maybe, walking distance maybe. Something along those lines. So he used to take food with him and go. And it's mentioned in the books of Seerah that the food he used to pack with him and take it with him. On the way, that mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, walking up to the cave, when he used to see poor people, he would give them some of the food he had packed for himself. So he would go, and when the food ran out, then he would come back home to Khadija radiallahu anha to take some more food. ثم يرجع إلى خديجة فيتزود لمثلها حتى جاءه الحق وهو في غار حراء. Until one day the truth came to him whilst he was in the cave of Hira. فجاءه الملك فقال, so the angel Jibreel came to him and said, اقرأ, read. قال ما أنا بقارئ. He said, I am not good at reading, I don't know how to read. Meaning, لا أحسن القراءة, I'm not good at reading, I don't know how to read. So then it mentions, قال فأخذني فغطني حتى بلغ مني الجهد. That the angel then got a hold of me and pressed me so that I could hardly bear it. Like Jibreel squeezed him and pressed him until he could hardly bear it. ثم أرسلني, then he let me go. فقال, and then Jibreel said again, اقرأ, read. قلت, the messenger says, I said, ما أنا بقارئ, I'm not a reader, I cannot read, I'm not good at reading. فأخذني فغطني الثاني حتى بلغ مني الجهد ثم أرسلني فقال اقرأ. Again Jibreel took hold of him and squeezed him until he could barely handle that pressure, and then he let go of him again and said, read. Again the messenger said, ما أنا بقارئ. Again the angel squeezed him again and let him go. And then the third time after he let him go, he then said, فقال اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق. Read in the name of your Lord who created. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق, who created mankind from that clot. فرجع بها رسول الله. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam returned with all of that information of what had just happened. يرجف فؤاده, and his heart was beating severely. His heart was beating severely. It mentions in some narrations how his muscles were even shaking. Such was his experience, this angel coming to him in the cave, squeezing him tight, telling him to read. An amazing event had happened, and he was fearful. His heart was pounding and his muscles shaking, and he came back to Khadija radiallahu anha and said to her, فدخل على خديجة بنت خويلد فقال زملوني زملوني. He said to Khadija, cover me, cover me, cover me with something. فزملوه حتى ذهب عنه الروع. So they covered him with something until that fear was over. فقال لخديجة وأخبرها الخبر. So then he told Khadija radiallahu anha what happened. لقد خشيت على نفسي. He said, I feared for myself. I feared something might have happened to me. فقالت له خديجة. So Khadija said to him, كلا. She said to him, never. Never. Meaning you have nothing to fear. والله ما يحزنك الله أبدا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never disgrace you. Allah would never disgrace you. إنك لا تصل الرحم. That you keep the ties of kinship, good relations. وتحمل الكل. And you help the poor and destitute, those in poverty and poor, you help them. وتكسب المعدوم. And you also help the destitute, the ones who have nothing, you help them. وتقر الضيف. And you serve the guests and you honor the guests. وتعين على نوائب الحق. And you assist the deserving, calamity afflicted ones. You help those in calamity. So she said, because of all these things you do, all of this goodness in your character, Allah would never disgrace you. Allah would never cause you to grieve. فانطلقت به خديجة. So then Khadija took him حتى أتت به ورقة بن نوفل ibn أسد ibn عبد العزى. She took him to Waraqa ibn Nawfal, who was her uncle's son. Ibn Ammi Khadija, her uncle's son, so her first cousin. And Waraqa ibn Nawfal كان امرأ قد تنصر في الجاهلية. He was a man who had become a Christian during the period of ignorance. وكان يكتب الكتاب العبراني. And he used to know how to write in Hebrew. He used to know how to write in Hebrew letters. فيكتب من الإنجيل بالعبرانية ما شاء الله. So he used to write from the gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. وكان شيخا كبيرا قد عمي. And Waraqa ibn Nawfal was an elderly man at this time. He was an elderly man, an old man, and he had become blind. Waraqa ibn Nawfal was old and blind at that time. So Khadija, when she took the Prophet there, she said to Waraqa, Ya ibn Am, O my son of my uncle, Isma' min ibn akhik. Listen to what your brother's son has to say. Meaning, listen to what Muhammad has to say. Mention it in that polite way. فَأَخْبَرَهُ. So he, the messenger, then told him. The messenger then spoke to him and told him what happened. So when Khadija said to him, Ya ibn Am, Isma' min ibn akhik, O my cousin, listen to your brother's son, listen to the Prophet. فَقَالَ لَهُ وَرَقَ. Waraqa then said to the Prophet, Ya ibn akhi, ماذا ترى? O my brother's son, what have you seen? فَأَخْبَرَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم خَبَرَ مَا رَأَى. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم told him what he had seen and experienced in the cave of Hira. فَقَالَ لَهُ وَرَقَ. So then Waraqa said to him, هَذَا النَّامُوسِ الَّذِي نَزَّلَ اللَّهُ عَلَى مُوسَى. He said, this is the same one that Allah sent to Musa. This is the same one who keeps the secrets, Angel Jibreel, who Allah sent to Musa. يَا لَيْتَنِي فِيهَا جَذَعٌ لَيْتَنِي أَكُونُ حَيًّا إِذْ يُخْرِجُكَ قَوْمُكَ. Then Waraqa said, I wish I was young. Waraqa was old at this time, very old and blind. He said, I wish I was young and I could live up to the time when your people will push you out. I wish I could live long enough to that time when your people, the Quraysh, the Mushrikun, will force you out. The messenger said, فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أو مخرجيهم, they are going to force me out, they are going to drive me out. قال نعم لم يأتي رجل قط بمثل ما جئت به إلا عوديا. No man has ever come with the likes of what you have come with, this revelation, except that they were shown enmity or treated with hostility. وَإِن يُدْرِكُنِي يَوْمُكَ أَنْصُرْكَ نَصْرًا مُؤَزَّرًا. And if I do manage to live until that time, if I am alive until that time, then I will defend you and support you strongly. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَنْشَبْ وَرَقَةً أَنْ تُوفِيَ وَفَتَرَ الْوَحِيِّ. But a few days later, only a few days later, Waraqa ibn Nawfal died. That is the narration in Al-Bukhari that speaks about what happened with the beginning of the revelation there, of how the messenger went to the cave of Hira and the angel came to him, and then with Waraqa ibn Nawfal. Was Waraqa ibn Nawfal therefore classified as a believer or not?
Yes.
Yes? Mu'min?
He believed the previous religion.
He believed?
Religion
He believed in the religion of Isa alayhi salam?
I don't think so now. I don't think he became Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was only one revelation at that point then, so he didn't actually receive, did he even know he was a prophet at that time?
Well, he did. He definitely did. He said that's the same angel that came to Musa. They all knew Musa was a prophet, so he recognized that he is basically a prophet.
So he didn't actually bear witness. He didn't dare share.
Mm-hmm.
But the revelation was not revealed at that time.
Well, the faith, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Revelation had begun though. The revelation had begun. He was a prophet, and Waraqa knew. He said that's the same angel, Jibreel, who came to Musa, who was a prophet. So he knew you've become a prophet.
At the same time, he said that he would defend the Prophet.
He said, I will defend you strongly on that day when they force you out.
Also, this is his uncle, the prophet's uncle. He defended him as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's the homework, obviously. The homework is going to be to check, to find out, to investigate. Is Waraqa ibn Nawfal considered a believer or not? Or what do we say exactly about him? Because if he's a believer, then do we also say he's a companion? A few issues then to look into. So that can be the homework this week. Have a look into the issue regarding Waraqa ibn Nawfal. And the next week we'll talk about that before moving on, insha'Allah ta'ala. So we'll stop on that for today then. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.